Welcome back, everybody. My name is Kareen Mills, and I'm your host. This is the Being a Mother Hustler podcast. Super duper excited today because I have this amazing woman that I met through Instagram, and we immediately just hit it off because the way that this woman shows up on Instagram, and I'll have her share where we can find her in the end. But I just want to welcome you, Hillarie.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. And I totally agree. Our vibes totally match. And it's always good to find other women that show up and are themselves on social media because that's hard to come by.
Yes. Isn't it amazing how social media can just truly connect you no matter how far you are from each other? Like, we're total strangers even right before we came on here, but I feel like I've known you for like
Right.
ever.
Yeah, it's so crazy. It's like that way in some of my best friends, I didn't meet in person for over a year. And so, yeah, absolutely. It's crazy.
Wonderful. So let's start talking about you because I'm excited to hear your story, your journey, and everything that encompasses of how you show up now, because we don't always show up this way, right? We have
Right.
to go through specific life events. We have to go through experiences that could either be bad, good, or indifferent. So I love hearing people's childhood. Why don't you start there and talk about your childhood and then take us through the teenage years of how that childhood really impacted you? Because one
Sure.
of the goals, even though my mission is to mother, or vision is to mother the world, the real daily mission is to validate and evaluate other mom entrepreneurs to make sure that they don't feel isolated, because entrepreneurship is super isolating if you don't plug in a community. And then the other piece is there's a lot of foster kids that may have a parent, but they're not with their parents or don't have the relationship and don't really have the outlet to learn from a mother or a parent. So we are their mother.
Absolutely. I love that.
Yeah. Go for it, girlfriend.
Okay. So I grew up in what I like to call the smallest big town in Central California. I grew up in Bakersfield, California. It has over 500,000 people, but you would never know that it's that big of a city because it has like everybody knows everybody. If you come from a certain family, there's a very just like a small town feel to it. And so I grew up in that town my whole life. I had two amazing parents. Both were entrepreneurs and small business owners while I was growing up. And so I really at a young age had an itch for entrepreneurship, and I knew I was made for something big. I was always just like this loud, boisterous, like crazy girl. And I like to tell this story as kind of a pivotal point in my childhood. I was only about 3 years old. And I grew up in a Pentecostal Assemblies of God church.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know anything about that faith, we like to dance, raise our hands, sing, like we are crazy for Jesus. And my parents were super involved in church, and they were always generally like on stage, on worship team, like my mom and dad were in the choir. And so I was always the kid sitting in the front row with all the PKs. Pastors' kids. My best friends were pastors' kids. I might as well have been a pastor's kid. But we all sat on the front row in church every Sunday morning and Wednesday morning and Sunday night or Wednesday night and Sunday night. I mean, we were there all the time. And one Sunday after church, one of my pastors came up to my parents and said, I learned how to worship through your daughter. And she has a calling on her life, and she's just going to be able to reach so many people through this calling. And so at that point, obviously I was 3. I didn't know you know, what that meant. And I don't even remember my parents telling me at that age. I just remember it being like this constant theme throughout my life that they would say, Hillarie, you have a calling on your life. Don't mess up your calling. Don't, like, you need to, you know, be strong and keep going and going and going. And as I grew up, that was so much pressure on me. And especially like not understanding like, what is a calling? Like what is, you know, and I grew up in, you know, church. So I had heard that term, you know, thrown around and, you know, talked about. But throughout my life, I just experienced so much pressure, I think, because that was always spoken over to me. Or over me. And so when I was in, you know, elementary school, it was just like, kind of like, yeah, I went with it. I was a huge nerd, like totally got made fun of because I was that one that was like always raising their hand in class, always, you know, like being loud, being boisterous, but I didn't know how to like have that self-control to like control, you know, and so I kind of, as I grew up, I kind of phased out of that, but I still craved that attention and not knowing why, you know, or how to use that craving for attention. Something that I know now is, I don't know if any of your listeners or you look into the Enneagram at all, but I'm an Enneagram 3, which means I'm an achiever and I like to be in the spotlight. And I can use that for good, but I didn't realize that when I was growing up. So as I got into junior high and high school, I started making bad decisions because I was like, I just want to be known. Like, I don't care how I'm known. Like, I just want to be known. And it got me into a lot of trouble. I started seeking the attention of boys first before the, you know, instead of seeking, you know, my attention, like, and from God or, you know, my family and friends, like it was just like, I needed to have, I don't know, I was addicted to that attention. So I made some really just like poor decisions and got involved with, you know, just things that I shouldn't have. And I was always the top of my class, always very smart, but I like played down how smart I was. And I know, like, it's like, I think back on it now and I'm like, oh, like you could have, you know, like that's an awesome quality, but it's like I think sometimes, especially as like pretty women, like sometimes we're like, oh, we like our brains won't make us as pretty. And I think that is like one of the things, like if I ever meet, you know, I have my stepsons are in high school and they're starting to date and stuff like that. And I tell them, go for the girls that are smart, like don't just go for that pretty face, like make sure that is, you know, a component and, you know, all of that. And that your self-worth, my self-worth was just how I looked. And it wasn't about my brain or my spirit or anything. And so I just lost that calling. So I decided that because of like all this stuff I got mixed in high school, I was like, I just need to get as far away from California as I possibly can. And so as I was looking for colleges, I had some very extended family that lived in Missouri. And I went and visited a couple summers in a row, and they had a local college, which is where I ended up graduating from, Southeast Missouri State University. And their programs in marketing and PR were like in the top, you know, like 5 in the country, which was like, okay, this is what I wanted to do. So like, I'm just going to like go do this. And so I moved not knowing anybody, but basically inside my head, my goal was I needed to get married as fast as possible. Like I need this family. Like I'm going to get married by 21, have my first kid at 22, you know, like all this stuff. And I had this schedule and I was completely ignoring that calling. It just kept getting pushed further and further away. It wasn't what God wanted for my life. It was what I wanted for my life.
Wow. Let's talk about really quick. I want to dive deeper into how smart you really were, but yet you've kind of buried it underneath the beauty and the attractiveness that you have, because I was the same way. And I was actually the top of the class from first grade till about sixth grade. And then I felt like I was always on the limelight, or I was punished for my success. And maybe it's a different twist in yours, but I felt like there was even more expectation of me because I was the top of the class.
Yes.
And I felt like it was always a pressure of, and looking back now in hindsight, that's what we do on a daily basis now that we're more awakened in life, that we always want to be a better version of ourselves. But that way of being a better version by pressuring your children to, to always be, I mean, I don't pressure my kids, but I do encourage. I think there's a difference between side by side and locking arms with your children versus like pressuring them. And so I felt that same pressure that you had. And I felt like I was always this popular kid, and I was always this, and we never, as humans, we were never satisfied, right? You could be the nerdest and making fun of, and you could be the most popular, but we all go through the same issues. And I didn't like that. I wanted to be unseen. I didn't want to be visible anymore. And so towards the end of my elementary school, I actually dropped into a salutatorian, a second into the first. And in fact, the first was the second person who's been second of me for a long time. I kind of uplifted her and made her the first. And I think I just kind of threw the whole thing out. And, like I figured out, like I threw the whole thing out and I still ended up in second. So I feel like I don't need the validation of everybody, of all these adults. I just want to be quiet and I just want to be myself. And so when I went into high school, I literally hid the fact that I was so smart. I grew up in the Philippines, and I went into high school that is like so exclusive. There's thousands of kids that takes the test and only 120 gets admitted. And so I was one of them. And I throughout high school, I really did not even try. Like I had so much fun. I took the attention on a different way. Like I still got attention, but it was more like vandalism, like troublemaker. It was a totally different attention because I was tired of being put in a box that I felt like I didn't belong.
Yeah, I totally can relate. That's exactly, it was definitely I was like one of the smartest kids throughout all of elementary school, all of junior high, and then something in high school switched in me and it was like, I don't want to be smart anymore. I just want to have fun. I just want to, and until high school, like I had braces, glasses, and so it was like once I got contacts and once I got my braces off, it was like, oh my gosh, this caterpillar turned into like this butterfly, and I don't want the butterfly to be hidden by like, I'm always in a book and I'm always just doing these academic things.
Yes.
All of this. And like, I went so far as to changing high schools my junior year because I did it. All those people that I had gone to school with, they knew me as that person. And I felt like I could never be anyone else than that smart kid. Changed schools my junior year of high school.
Yeah.
And I was the complete opposite. Yes. Was I still in all the AP classes, all of that? Absolutely.
Imagine.
But I wasn't the first one, like raising their hand. I was in the back. I was the one passing notes with the boy next to me or on my phone texting,
But imagine that kind of, like, we talk about that pressure as if it's nothing because we're adults and we know that it's just silly. But imagine that pressure carried on by somebody 11 years old, 10 years old.
Yeah.
Like it definitely magnifies everything.
Yeah. I even look at my 6-year-old right now. He's in kindergarten. And like we had parent teacher conferences for him. And it's like, they go through like all of these things. And like my initial reaction, if I see any type of bad mark is like, oh my gosh, what are we doing right? Like all of this stuff, but it's like, oh my gosh, he's 6.
Yeah.
Like he's 6. Like he needs to be a kid. He needs
Yes.
to
My
like,
husband and I struggle with each other on that because I'm like you, like, okay, the kid is 9 years old because my youngest is 9, my oldest is 13 this year.
Mhm.
They're both turning 10 and 13, but you know, he was a preemie 3 months early, and
Mhm.
he's always been like behind, but he's not very vocal when it comes to his smarts. He's super smart, but he's not like Big Brother who loves recognition.
Sure.
So Big Brother is always so loud about his accomplishment and his
Mhm.
sports, and he's very sports inclined. My youngest is like, I don't really like sports, you know?
Mhm.
But my oldest loves recognition. Like, I think you and me like that. And
Yeah.
so he always is loud about it. So because of that, we're always in the loop of what he's doing, you
Mhm.
know? And I mean, like, literally, Hillary, he cried, I think it was fourth grade, when he got 4 out of 5.
Yeah, I hear you.
You know, like the pressure that they just put on themselves. And I was like, Caden, it's okay, buddy. It's do you realize, like, that's almost perfect?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, like,
It's
my
crazy as a
yeah,
society.
and my
Yeah.
youngest just doesn't thrive in recognition. He
Mhm.
doesn't really like to have the spotlight on him, so he's very quiet about it.
Mhm.
And when we have parent teacher conference and there's something that he's not doing so well, but he's doing in everything else like super well. He loves math
Mhm.
and English, but he's in the Spanish immersion program. Like, he just does not like Spanish. And
Mhm.
so my husband like is so harsh on him, and I'm like, dude, like, the kid has like is a
Yeah.
math whiz, and maybe we should get him out of immersion and put him in a regular class. So that's what we're going to do next year. But because it becomes more of like, we're focusing on the negatives here.
Hmm. And I think that's like our role as parents too, is to like look at like, okay, what are your child's strengths and what are their weaknesses? And not only just, but like make it more well-rounded. And like, I had amazing parents, and like my mom says, I wish I would have recognized, you know,
Mm.
some of these things, but like hindsight's 2020, right? Like, you
Yes.
know, it's just, yeah. And so it definitely, I think the pressures in life really put an impact like on how my future was. Like my past really made a difference in like how the decisions that I made as I got into college and into, you know, where I am
Wow.
now, for
Well,
sure.
let's talk about getting married soon,
Yeah.
because in my culture is the same way. In fact, we couldn't get out of the house. We had to live with our parents forever until we got married. So some of my peers got married because of that only reason. So they don't hurt their parents' feelings, and very religious too, coming from a Catholic background. You know, we're not supposed to have sex before getting married to our husband, things of that nature. So there's a ton of those, not only expectation from our parents, but society in general and the religious sector, which we were so exposed to growing up. So talk about when you moved, you were like, I
Yeah.
need to get married.
Yeah. I was like, because I think to me, like a man was security, right? And so I didn't have anyone there. So I needed to find someone there and to have that security. So I got married at 19. I had only known, he's my ex-husband now, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit, but I had only known him for a year before we got married.
Mm-hmm.
I met him my first semester in college. I didn't date around much. He was like, I dated like one other guy besides him in college. And after we got married, and I knew in my heart, like the day I walked down the aisle, and I hate like, I sometimes hate telling the story because I want to be always very transparent with my kids.
Right.
And very like honest, and that it is just part of my story, and I'm not, you know, I'm not proud of it, but I remember walking down the aisle, getting married, and thinking to myself, you should not be doing this. This is not the man that you need to be marrying. And there were so many warning signs against it, and I did it anyways. And there's actually a picture that I have that my dad's walking me down the aisle. We're about to walk down the aisle, and it's like, I am just a mess. I'm crying, and people are assuming it's because I'm so happy. Wow. But I know from that picture, every time I look at that picture, I see a young little girl scared to death about a decision that she's about to make. Wow. And so ended up getting married to him, and within a year we had our oldest son, who's now 6. And after that, I was like, I don't want to have any more kids, because I already knew, like, I was like, I don't want to like grow my family anymore with him, because I already knew, like, I was thinking of separation. I was thinking of what's going to be my way out, what's going to be my escape route. Wow. And so, yeah, like I knew. And so I got an IUD put in, thinking everything's going to be fine. Our family won't grow anymore, like I'll be able to get out. And I ended up getting a job at a marketing agency, and just threw myself into that job and threw myself into the people there. And I threw myself into the people there. And that is when I thought I had found my first escape route. I had my first affair. Wow. And I thought, this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to work my booty off. I'm going to have a really great relationship with this guy at work, and I can go home and pretend everything's fine, because I'm getting the satisfaction I need out of my job. I'm getting the satisfaction I need out of a man, not my husband, but I'm getting it. And then I would go home and pretend everything was fine.
Wow.
And that went on for a little over a year. And then I found out I was pregnant with my second son.
Wow.
And I was like, this is impossible. Like, I could count on like one hand the amount of times in a year, like, that it would have even been, possible. And I'm like, I have an IUD, like, what is going on? And my IUD had moved to my colon.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. It had gone out of my uterus and moved to my colon, and I got pregnant with my second son. And so during that pregnancy, I was still having the affair. We had not acted on, it was just a very emotional affair until I found out I was pregnant. But after I became pregnant, it was like I relied on the person that I was having an affair with more than I did my husband.
Wow.
And it was just like this very weird time in my life. I was in complete denial, all this. Well, fast forward, I had my baby, my second son, Lincoln, and he was born with Down syndrome. So not only was I not wanting another child, but now I have a son with Down syndrome. Mm-hmm. And I was like, this is like, my life was just falling apart. I was like, I can't do this. I don't want to do this. I don't, I just like, it was just a mess. And yeah, it was so crazy. And Steph, I said to myself, okay, I'm going to just have to make this work with my husband. I broke off the affair. I changed jobs, because I was like, that's the only way I'm going to be able to completely cut it off, is if I change jobs. And really, I was like, I'm going to give this a good solid effort. Well, it didn't work. Things got from bad to worse at home. I had not only, had the stress of a failing marriage, but I also now had the stress of, 2 kids under 2, one with Down syndrome. And it was just like, it was so much. So I found myself in another affair, because it was my escape. Mm-hmm. And it was like this pattern. And like, I kept on, going back to like, gosh, this is not what my life was supposed to be like. I had a calling on my life. Why did I mess it up? Where did I go wrong? Where couldn't I, and it was just this mix of, frustration.
Do you think that comfort zone that you have with those affairs came and rooted from your high school years?
100%. I know 100% because I found that validation in guys. Like I didn't find it in it. That's where I felt like I was in the spotlight, and it was like, oh yeah, Hillary's a really good kisser. And that was my achievement, right?
Wow.
Or Hillary does really good X, you know, whatever. And it was like, even though I was known for like that type of stuff, which is not the stuff you want to be known for, it was validation to me. It was that spotlight in a different way. And so I totally think that affected my decisions to go for in an affair, for sure. For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's probably a lot of women that can relate to that validation because, you know, as women in those ages, we're very judgmental, we're very catty, we're very everything. I mean, you know how we are as women, especially in high school. And I think that, you know, guys give us those validation, especially when they're trying for something more than just a friendship.
Mm-hmm.
But we receive those in the most, it feels so good way, you know? So I think that now with the new generation of women rising above a lot of these things, and I know a lot of nonprofits, like a nonprofit called Girls Inc. and a lot of women empowering girls type thing are really showing up because of those kinds of things. When we're younger, we're just so open to a lot of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, you're a mom of boys, and now I have 2 boys, and then I have 3 stepsons as well. So
wow.
Boys. Yeah. And I'm like, I think it's just as important as moms to teach our boys to not, like, that's not how you want to validate your, you know, like, look at it in a different way, you know? And like, I think it's our roles as moms of boys to be open about that stuff with our boys too. And have them be aware of girls' feelings and girls that, you know, how to respect women and, you know, all of that. I think that is so important. We talk so much about girls standing up for themselves and all this, but what about the young men of the world? And how are we raising up that next generation of men to make sure that we treat these women with respect?
Well, they're getting actually a lot better because of women like you and me who are showing up in a different way because of the things that we experience. As you know, we were raised by our parents the way they were raised by the generation before them. And as it transfers, a lot of those transfers as well. And so for me, I just like revisit the childhood that I had. And I used to hate it when people treat me like a child, even though I knew I was a child. And I used to hate it when I can't reason out, because in my culture, the minute that you reason out, it's considered as talking back in the most negative way. And you should honor your parents. In, you know, as a Catholic family, we should honor our parents, and they brought us out to this world and we're forever indebted to them type thing. And so there's a lot of taboos to like reasoning out. And so now as a parent, I make it a point to hear my kids. And if it gets out of hand, then I'll step in and be a parent. But I always want to give them the equal energy that they deserve, because I want to parent in a very different way. And it's amazing what we show our kids is what they learn from us. And quickly, I know this is such like a great story just in the neighborhood of what we're currently discussing. Is my son had a project at school, and it was like reading this book with 4 different characters, and 4 different characters that has really tough life right now. Like they're going through such a challenge in their lives, and they had only to pick one person and create a narrative of why they chose that person and why they did not choose the rest of the 4. And it's funny because I'm like, okay, cool. Who did you choose? And I forgot the name of the character, but this character is a single mom, is pregnant, is about to be a single mom. And she had a boyfriend, but when the boyfriend learned about the pregnancy, he walked away from her. But all her counselors, because she's 16 years old, have been telling her and suggesting to give up for adoption and all that good stuff. And she refuses to do that. And she continues to go after her dreams. And she wants to go to school and finish and become a business owner. And I mean, all these things that are like so parallel to the strength I show my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, wow. And she goes, I would love to read you my narrative, Mom. And he read me, my oldest, a narrative. And I was like, wow, buddy, that's so impressive. He says, you know, she has it tough, but I commend her because she's going for it and she's not listening to what others want, but she's listening to what she really wants.
Yeah.
And what she wants is to have this baby, and she's going to do everything in her power, even at a 16-year-old early age, to raise this child. And Mom, she's a mother hustler. And I'm like, heck yeah, she is.
Yeah, totally.
You know? And it's like, oh, you know, like he respected that drive of her.
Mm-hmm.
And her decision of having the baby and not judging her for being pregnant at 16. And like, here I am thinking, oh, he's going to be like talking about judging her at 16 in his narrative. And it was so positive that I'm like, thank you, God.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that kind of like goes right into like kind of like my second half, like almost the redemption part of my story is I ended up leaving my ex-husband, became a single mom, had to, you know, move back in with my parents. Like it was, you know, embarrassing. And I went through a really tumultuous divorce. There was tons of back and forth and craziness. And about after a year and a half, I told myself, I am so tired of feeling like this. Mm-hmm. Like, what is, you know, I have to go back to my roots. I have to go back to the basics. What is this? So there was a week that my kids were on vacation with their dad, and I went back home. And I hadn't been home in 5-6 years. And I went back home and I surrounded myself with the people who were with me when that calling was spoken over my life at age 3. And I remembered who I was.
Wow.
And I went back to Missouri. I quit my job and I started Hillarie Kay Marketing, which is my business that I have today.
How long ago was that?
That was only about 18-ish months ago.
Wow.
And now I can honestly say, like, I've learned that calling, that being in the spotlight calling, is to connect with women and to do exactly what I'm doing now, share my story. And my story has so many different facets, right? So like, I can share my story with moms. I can share my story with business owners, you know, with a bunch of different people. And that's what the spotlight is to me. And that's what I didn't know it at that time. And like now, like I know that that's my calling. And now I'm, you know, an entrepreneur, just like how I wanted to be when I was little. I'm happy with who I had to find who I was before I was ever going to be happy in a relationship. And now I have the most amazing husband ever who is just so supportive of me. I have, 3 bonus sons now. We literally have five boys from 4 to 15. So we're busy. And we make it work. Like, we live in 2 states. I go back and forth every week, but all of that the life that I have now could never have happened unless I went back to my roots and found who I was again, and then found community and people who helped me through that journey. I'm a part of an amazing organization now called the More Than Me movement. And it's all about women and and our mission statement is together we are more. And that it's sharing each other's stories, listening to each other, and lifting each other up instead of ripping each other down. Mm-hmm. And it has just been so powerful. And like, that's like when I tell my story and people ask me to tell my stories. Yeah, I have a lot of ugh, in my story, but my past does not dictate my future. And if you make the right decisions, you know, if you acknowledge it, go back to your roots, figure out who you are, and then surround yourself with community, like there's nothing that's going to stop you. And now I get the, you know, the pleasure of telling my story and using it for God's glory. Like it's really a redemption story, and how if you go back to your roots, and like for me, it was what that calling was that was spoken over my life, and figure out what, you know, what it means is like this right now, this interview is me being in the spotlight. Mm-hmm. This is me, you know, living in my purpose and living in my calling. And now it's like, okay, I just, you know, as I keep on, I have to remind myself, like, go back to your roots, go back to your purpose, go back to your calling, and share. Because I think that's the most important thing, is sharing. There is release in that, and there's healing in that, and there's redemption in that.
Yes. So I'm a mindset coach, and I talk a lot about childhood, because I know that there's always something in our childhood that will lead us back in circle. Like everything goes full circle. Mm-hmm. And when I was listening to your story, and as you were saying that you went back to your roots and went home, that little girl inside of us is always there. Mm-hmm. Always. It never left us. It goes with us everywhere we go. It's part of our lives. And when you said, had I not gone back to my roots, I would never have realized what my true calling, the calling that they've been speaking over me forever. Mm-hmm. But also, if you take that beyond going back to your roots, you can also look at the adversities and the mess that happened in your life that made you go back to that roots. So you really can't discount the fact that, I know you said what happened to you is like, blah, you know, it's not so great. But a lot of times the not so great things in life allows you to really dig deeper and realize, okay, what do I need to do? Because this right here is not working, and it's not servicing my soul, and it's not allowing me to really go after, but I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what I'm going after for. Mm-hmm. So how do I then go realize that purpose, that calling? Mm-hmm. And it's so smart of you to like go back home and remember where you came from. And that's always what I like say to people is, never forget where you came from. When it's tough, go back to that little girl. When life is just not working out, reflect on your story. Like your story has all the secrets. Mm-hmm. If you just reflect on them. Mm-hmm. So I'm so excited that you are changing lives by telling your story, and you are becoming a vessel to a lot of people through your business.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. I was going to say, like, this is just the beginning. Like I said, like I've partnered with an organization called the More Than Me Movement, which is seriously an amazing, amazing organization. And that's just my first step, right? Like this is so relatively new for me. And like, I think it's so important just to continue to put yourself out there. And like, I'm so excited for all of the other, opportunities like this, where I get to speak and share my story and hopefully help, so many other women who I know there's other women who have gone through similar things.
Yeah. What's your favorite part about your business?
Okay. So I love, and it's all about connecting for me. Like if I can connect with someone, that is what fuels me. Like it goes back to that spotlight thing. Like, it's like, yes, like I could, they saw me, and we're, if I can put into them, that fuels me. So I love connecting with small business owners and learning their stories, because so much of marketing is about telling your story. One of the main things I tell my clients is you have to brand yourself first, not your product, because you have to connect with people's hearts first before you connect with their wallets. That is like my primary, and every client that I've worked with, that is one of the main things we start with is tell me your story, because that's what's going to make you money is if people connect with you and the mission behind your business. And so that's seriously like my favorite thing. All my clients generally become my friends because I get so invested in their story. And that's what you want, you know, to put out to your customers, you know, whether you're selling a product or service, you're selling yourself. And
you can sell anything if you do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so that's absolutely my most favorite part of my job is just connecting with other small business owners and learning their story and helping them put it out there.
That's awesome. I love that because that is really so aligned with what I tell people. So I'm very involved in the local networking scene. I'm like the queen of networking in the small business community and nonprofits and philanthropic stuff here in town, Portland, Oregon, Vancouver, Washington area. But I get asked all the time. And so I actually founded this networking platform that is exclusive. It's membership based for B2B, and it's called Game Changers Global Network. I co-founded it with a really good friend of mine, Jen Lofton, and we get asked all the time, like, how do you guys, like, we give a spotlight to a business member to present every week, you know, and we get asked like, what should I talk about on my first presentation? Because we give them, if they have a pool of 20 or under members, we give them 20 minutes. And if they have a pool of, like, my home group has like 30, 35 people. And it's hard to go around everybody if you give everybody 20 minutes. So now we drop it to 2 speakers every week and 10 and 10 every week. And so I think the problem that with people in the B2B world or even in the professional world, when they talk about their business, they start talking about the entire freaking industry and the features and benefits and all these good stuff. They're good stuff. That's why I said good stuff. But they're the same all across the board, no matter who you talk to. So what makes you different? And it's like this blank look in their mind because they don't know the answer. Like, what makes you different? So in essence, I'm kind of like doing what you're doing, but through my networking platform and teaching people how to present themselves. And they're like, well, I don't know. I'm like, what's your story? Like, how did you get here? How did you ever started this industry? What made you pick this industry of all the industries in the world? Talk about your story. And so, like, the light bulb in their mind, it's so amazing to look at their face when they're like, oh, okay, like a relief of like, talk from your heart. If your heart has so much in you, the only downside is they begin to talk, you know, you're in a business setting and there's a subtle way of talking about your adversities in like a professional setting versus like just like let all your laundry out. that's also the problem, because it can give your audience a distasteful palate when you're talking something that's very you know, super top secret, and then everybody starts sharing their secrets. So we have to coach on, okay, how do you then professionally tell your story? And because your story is what, like, people ask me all the time, what should I do to set me apart? You already have it in you. Well, what do you mean? Tell your story. Same thing what you do. So easy, but so hard, right?
Yeah. And I have 3 questions like that I ask my clients, like when they're like, when they ask me that question, what do you mean? Like, I'm like, okay, number 1, tell me, what are you bust at? You know, number 2, who do you serve? Who is your, you know, audience that you want to serve? And don't tell me everybody. Be specific. Get down to the nitty gritty of who you serve. And then how do you do it uniquely? And with those 3 questions, you can put together your pitch, your story.
Yeah.
And it works. It's like, it just has to be broken down.
Yeah. I hate when like a lot of skincare people that I meet in networking say anybody who has skin, anybody with a pulse. And I'm like, you ain't getting anywhere if that's your answer and that's your pitch.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. And how do you do that? Do you do this by project with your clients, or are you charging by the hour, or how are you doing your services?
Sure. Yeah. I have a couple of different ways I do it. With a lot of my clients, I start with marketing and operations strategy plans. So I go through a needs analysis, ask them a ton of questions, and then put together a game plan for their marketing and operations of their business. And that's how I start a lot. And then they end up going, and that's like a one-time fee. And then they end up going into like a retainer services and paying by the hour for my work monthly after that. But then there's some clients who already have their plan and they need just consulting, like marketing consulting and figuring out, is this idea worth it? How do I create this idea? How do I make it happen? And then I have like retainers for them to where I charge by the hour. So there's a part where I charge by project and then a part where I charge by the hour.
So what do you think you can advise small business right now from a marketing standpoint? The biggest mistake that most businesses, because I deal with a lot of small businesses as well it's been my career. It's just small business. I have such a big heart because I have been a brick and mortar small business owner before, and that's no fun. But it can be if you know what you're doing. And so talk to me about the common issues or common things that are missing all across the board with business owners, and what advice can you give them?
Sure. Yeah. So the first thing is the story aspect that we just talked about. That is the main thing that I stress. But then 2, I tell people all the time, I can send you all the business in the world, but if you don't have strong operations behind your business, then your customers are going to have a bad experience. So look at the operations. What can you, number one, what can you outsource? What are the things that you're maybe not the best at that you can outsource? Number 2, what are the things in your business that you can automate? So this is huge for a lot of my clients. If they're in, consulting and need to schedule appointments, like how they set up, once someone clicks on a form, what happens after they click on that form? Then once it's submitted, do they get an email right away, or are they waiting for you in your busy schedule, to get back to them? And so number 1, story. Number 2, operations. And then number 3, authenticity. People can smell a fake a mile away. So how do you make sure that you're authentic in your marketing and not just saying this is the best, for your example, like skincare, this is the best skincare around? Well, don't just say the best, like give reasons why and like proven facts. Authenticity is often best shown through client testimonials. So find people that have had good experiences with you and have them tell the story behind your product or your service. So it's not just you giving lip service. It's you showing that, yes, no, what I am, this is truthful. This is honest. Like here's my here's what my customers or clients have to say. So number 1, knowing your story, your brand story. Number 2, have really kick butt operations, figure out, or you can automate and outsource. And number 3, be authentic. Those are like my top 3.
That's awesome. I love how you said that people can smell fake. And, when you talk about your features and benefits, a lot of the times, it literally goes into the agenda. You have like the agenda of making money. You have this like the negative connotation about the agenda is just so obvious, right? When you're the one talking about it. But when you have the testimonials, it's more of like intentions, good intentions. Third party is always best. Third party validation is always best. And when I miss like there was one time where I was really sick and I couldn't come to my group, and it was my turn to speak. I literally just called everybody in the group that when it's my turn, I don't want to pass it up. I would love for everybody to take my 10-minute spot and just stand up and talk about my services and my product if it has impacted you, and just do testimonials for me. And it was, it's like super amazing. But that's like one of the ways that you can market is testimonials are huge, because it's not coming from your mouth. It's coming from someone who actually had, like Amazon, who has like verified purchase, that's verified that for sure they've taken advantage of your product and they are happy with it and will continue to do so. So that's amazing. And thank you for that. Lots of business nuggets there.
Yeah. That's my jam. Like when I'm not talking, like and I'm sure like you saw like a change in my face too, when I talk about helping businesses. Like I'm all about sharing my story and connecting with people that way, but it's still relatively new for me to share my story. And so I'm learning how to feel that same joy and excitement through sharing my story as I do when I'm talking business and helping my clients tell and share their story. And I think that's something that like I don't plan on ever stopping learning and growing. And this is the area in my life right now that I'm learning and growing, being number one, being more of a listener, like to other people's stories as well, like personal stories, because I can listen to your business stories all day, but I've always had like a really hard time like listening to people's personal stories because it's like, I always want to be like, well, I did this, like you can do this. And I haven't had like a lot of compassion for it, because I'm like, if I can do this, then you can do this, like get over yourself, but I'm learning that everyone deals with things differently. And so as I'm stepping out and telling my story, part of that also is me stepping back and listening to other people's personal stories as well. And that I can just be that listening ear that I wanted, and being able to connect with them that way. I know that kind of went in a weird direction, but.
No, yeah. I understand. It's amazing the growth that we actually acquire by sharing our own story, and the healing that we acquire without even knowing, but just feel it, that you're becoming more okay about it. That means you're healing, right? And the more you share your story, the more permission you give to others to do the same, because if your story is making them feel good about it and they can relate to you, it makes them feel like, okay, if her story made me feel good and inspired and empowered, then maybe mine could do that to other people, because you can. The other piece too, because I used to be like you, like, okay, I came from the Philippines. I had nothing. In my beginning of being here, I was sued when I was 20 years old. And if I can overcome that, anybody can. But I've learned how to understand the different journey of people, and that my journey is not the same as the person next to me. And I need to have more compassion and just listen. I think the more listening skills I've acquired, and I've learned so much, I've gained so much skills just by podcasting and being able to hold space for people and listening to their story, that the more I'm doing this podcast, the more I have compassion for different kinds of people, because the level that we're at, whether we're higher or lower than the next person, is not the same level as the next person. And therefore, if we're not on the same level, because their story, not only that their story is different than ours, but the way that they tell their story based on their experience is going to be naturally different than ours. So we have, yes, we're mother hustlers, we're go-getters, but we have to be so much more compassionate to others, to just understand that where you're at is not where they're at, and vice versa. So thank you so much for everything that you have shared here. What's your kid's name? Boys,
So I have, so I'll go through the five. So I have my three bonus sons. Oldest is Eric, then Carter, then Grant. And then I have my two bio sons, Colt and Lincoln.
that's awesome. So wonderful. You're an awesome mama.
Thanks. I love it. It's not something that I ever thought that I would. I definitely never thought I would have five kids, but here I am. And
What's your message to your stepsons? They were listening.
Yeah. So, and that's an interesting question. I just want them to know that I think as a step parent, it's sometimes hard finding your place in your stepkids' stories, right? Like we're talking about the stories here. And I always want them to know that, like, I am not here to replace your mom. I am not here to, take over that role. What my role to you and what I want to is I want to be just another adult in your life who loves you, who cares for you, who has space for you. I love my stepsons. And like I had someone tell me, don't refer to them as your stepsons, refer to them as your bonus sons, because sometimes step has a negative connotation.
Yeah. Sure.
And so my bonus sons are a lot older, right? They're 15, 13, and 10. And I didn't come into their life until, a year or two ago. And so it's hard, that transition. And I never want to pressure them, and that's my biggest thing is like, there's no pressure with me. Like, be who you are. I'm not here to replace anybody in your life. I'm here to be a part of your story. I want to listen to you. I know it's hard and I know this transition. So like, that's
Mama.
Really like my biggest message to them is that, I'm just another person here that loves you and that cares for you, and wants to hold space.
What is your message to your kids? Because technology is amazing and my kids Google me all the time. And so if they ever wanted to know, okay, who is my mom? Because who we are to them is different than who we are to the world.
Yeah.
And they're very curious about who we are to the world. And not only that they are curious, they're also very proud of us. Because, my mama has a podcast or my mama is this, So what is your message to your sons, your youngest?
That you can do whatever you want, that you have purpose, you have calling. And just because your life might have been a little crazy at the beginning, that doesn't mean it's always going to be that way, and that your mama loves you, and just that you can do all the things and there are no limits for you, and that whatever you set your dreams to be, I know you will achieve them.
Wonderful. What is the biggest lesson you learned from your mom that you are applying to your motherhood?
Yeah. I think the biggest lesson I learned from my mom is we had a song called, I can never remember because there's so many covers of it, but it's I'll Stand By You. And she always used to tell me that, like, no matter what you do, I will stand by you. And that is one thing that nothing, but a line in the song says, nothing you confess will make me love you less. And I think that is one of the biggest things that I want to pass on to my kids, is that nothing they could ever tell me is going to make me love them less. And my mom has an infinite amount of love for me. And I just want to make sure that I express that same amount of love to my kids.
Thank you for that. What's your message to her?
You taught me how to be strong, Mom. You taught me how to be resilient and to overcome and to know who I am in Christ. And that's all that matters. And I am forever grateful for that.
Beautiful. Thank you for doing that. Thanks for being here today. I am so proud of you. I'm so proud of our friendship that's going to grow from here. And before I ask you all the last question that I have, I just want to commend you for rising above through your adversities and through your challenges in life. And it's hard enough to be mom, but it's another layer to be stepmom or bonus mom and being a business owner and being a wife. So girlfriend, we are a baddie, okay? So no matter what you hear, negative, anybody, just know that you have space on my podcast and you will forever put your mark on my podcast. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you. I so appreciate the opportunity.
For sure. Now let us know where to find you. I do know where to find you. Obviously, you're here. But let my listeners know where to find you. And if there's any freebie you'd like to share here, feel free. This would be a great time to do that.
Sure, absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram at Hillarie Kay. My name is spelled kind of weird, but I think it'll be in the show notes, but I'll spell it. It's HILLARIEKAY. And then also at HillaryKay.com. And then also I would really encourage you to follow the More Than Me movement, which is that I mentioned earlier. And that's on Instagram at More Than Me movement. I'm a part of that speaking tour. We have live events and coming up in Seattle, February 23rd, in Dallas, March 23rd, and there's going to be more dates launched soon. So those are the main places that I'm at. And I know we talked about today, like trying to develop your brand story. And in the link in my bio in Instagram, there are 5 questions to ask yourself when developing your brand story. That's a freebie you can download and kind of walk through that exercise. And if you need help developing that, I also have a place in the link in my bio for you to schedule a free needs analysis with me to talk through all of that.
Wonderful. Thank you for all that gifts. Appreciate you. Last question. When you heard the word mother hustler, what came to your mind and what is Hillarie's definition of it?
Mother hustler, someone who is a mom, wife, business owner, and does all the things and just stays afloat with a smile on their face.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Hillarie. I appreciate you. And this was really fun. Thank you so much for today. And I hope you have an amazing day.
Thank you. You do the same. It was a blast.